You grabbed a bottle of low-fat yogurt this morning, probably the same brand you have been buying for the last 3 or 4 years, maybe longer, and you ate it standing over the sink because that is just what you do now. It felt like the responsible choice. Low fat, some protein, nothing too heavy. And if someone told you that habit, that one small breakfast decision you made before 8 a.m. today, has been quietly working against your testosterone for years, you would probably think that sounds extreme. But it is not extreme. It is documented, it is measurable, and by the time this video is done, you are going to understand exactly why, and more importantly, what to do about it starting tonight. Here is the uncomfortable truth that the supplement industry and a lot of mainstream health advice have spent decades obscuring. Testosterone decline after 60 is real, but the rate of that decline, the severity of the symptoms, the fatigue, the muscle loss, the brain fog, the low drive, is not purely biological destiny. A significant portion of it is behavioral. It is the product of habits, foods, sleep patterns, and daily routines that most men over 60 were told were healthy, responsible, or just inevitable. And the fix is not a $200 monthly prescription, not a testosterone gel that costs $180 for a 30-day supply, not a clinic visit that runs $350 before insurance. The fix is cheaper, older, and hiding in plain sight. In the next several minutes, you are going to get the specific mechanism behind why certain everyday habits are suppressing your testosterone, the foods and simple physical practices that can support natural production, the mistakes men over 60 make that cancel out everything else, and a clear picture of what a realistic daily routine looks like. And if you want all of it in a single printable page you can stick on your fridge or take to the grocery store, there is a PDF at the end of this video that lays out the entire protocol in a format you can actually use. Let us start with the low-fat yogurt because that is not an accident. That is a perfect symbol of the problem. In the early 1980s, dietary fat became the villain in American nutrition. The message was simple, and it spread fast. Fat makes you fat. Fat clogs your arteries. Fat is dangerous. Low-fat products flooded grocery stores. Low-fat yogurt, low-fat cheese, low-fat salad dressing, low-fat everything. And men who were in their 30s and 40s at the time absorbed that message completely. Now those same men are in their 60s and 70s, and they are still eating low-fat everything, still doing what they were told was right. The problem is that testosterone is a steroid hormone, and steroid hormones are synthesized from cholesterol. Your body literally uses dietary fat and cholesterol as raw material to manufacture testosterone. When you spend decades on a low-fat diet, you are chronically undersupplying one of the core building blocks your endocrine system needs. A study published in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry back in 1984 found a positive correlation between dietary fat intake and testosterone levels in men. That research has been replicated in various forms since. More recently, a 2021 meta-analysis published in the Journal of the Endocrine Society reviewed multiple dietary studies and found that low-fat diets were consistently associated with lower testosterone levels compared to higher-fat diets. The effect was not enormous in any single study, but across years and decades of eating this way, the cumulative suppression is real and measurable. So the first practical thing you can do, and you can do this tonight, is stop avoiding fat. Not all fat and not in unlimited quantities, but whole eggs, full-fat dairy, red meat 2 or 3 times per week, olive oil, avocado, and fatty fish. These are not indulgences. For a man over 60 who wants to support his hormonal health, these are functional foods. A single whole egg contains roughly 186 milligrams of dietary cholesterol and around 5 grams of fat, including saturated fat. For decades, you were told to eat only the white. Throw that advice out. Eat the whole egg. 2 eggs in the morning with the yolks is a better testosterone breakfast than low-fat yogurt by a wide margin, and it costs maybe 60 cents more. Now let us talk about sleep, because this is where most men over 60 are losing the most ground without realizing it. The majority of your daily testosterone is produced during sleep, specifically during the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep and during REM cycles. Research from the University of Chicago, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2011, showed that men who slept only 5 hours per night for 1 week had testosterone levels 10 to 15% lower than their baseline. 10 to 15%. That is a meaningful drop, and it happened in 1 week. Imagine what happens over years of poor sleep. And men over 60 are disproportionately affected by sleep fragmentation, meaning they wake up multiple times per night. They lose deep sleep, they get lighter, shorter cycles. The testosterone production window shrinks. The fix is not always a pill or a prescription. A lot of sleep disruption in men over 60 comes from three specific correctable problems. The first is room temperature. Your core body temperature needs to drop slightly to initiate deep sleep. Most bedrooms are too warm. The research suggests a room temperature between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal for sleep quality in older adults. If your thermostat is set at 72 or 74, that alone may be interrupting your deep sleep cycles. Drop it by 5 degrees tonight, it costs nothing. The second problem is light exposure. Blue light from phones and television suppresses melatonin production, and melatonin is part of the cascade that leads to deep sleep. A man who watches television until 11 p.m. and then checks his phone in bed is actively suppressing the hormonal environment he needs for testosterone production. The cutoff should be 90 minutes before bed. Not because it sounds like a wellness tip, but because the melatonin suppression from blue light is measurable and documented, and melatonin onset timing directly affects sleep architecture. The third problem is alcohol. A lot of men over 60 have a drink or two in the evening, and there's nothing wrong with that socially or culturally. But alcohol, even 2 drinks, disrupts REM sleep. It causes you to fall asleep faster but wake up earlier, and it reduces the total time spent in the deep stages where testosterone is produced. If you're having 2 drinks 4 nights per week and wondering why you feel like a different person than you did at 55, the alcohol is a major variable. Cutting it to 1 drink or moving it earlier in the evening, at least 2 hours before bed, can meaningfully improve your sleep architecture within a week. Now let us get into the physical side, because this is where older men are getting the most counterproductive advice. If you are over 60 and someone has told you to walk more, do yoga, take it easy, listen to your body, and avoid heavy lifting, they gave you the wrong advice for testosterone. Not completely wrong, because walking and mobility work have their place, but the specific type of exercise that most reliably stimulates testosterone production is resistance training, and more specifically, compound movements that recruit large muscle groups: squats, deadlifts, rows, presses. The research on this is not subtle. A review published in Sports Medicine in 2012 found that resistance training consistently elevated testosterone levels in older men, and that higher intensity resistance training produced greater hormonal responses than lower intensity work. Now, before anyone worries about injury, understand that compound resistance training for a man over 60 does not mean loading a barbell with 300 pounds. It means using enough resistance that the last 2 or 3 repetitions of a set are genuinely difficult. It means doing goblet squats with a 25-pound kettlebell. It means doing Romanian deadlifts with a pair of 30-pound dumbbells. It means doing dumbbell rows and overhead presses with weights that challenge you. The load is relative. The principle is the same. The mistake most men over 60 make is defaulting to high repetition, low weight work because it feels safer. 15 reps with a 10-pound dumbbell does not create the mechanical and metabolic stress that triggers a meaningful hormonal response. You need progressive overload, meaning you need to be working with weights that are challenging enough to create adaptation. 3 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions with a weight where the last 2 reps are hard is a completely different hormonal signal than 3 sets of 15 with a weight that barely fatigues you. There is also a timing issue. Men over 60 who exercise in the morning tend to have better results with testosterone-related outcomes than those who exercise late at night. Morning exercise aligns with the natural cortisol peak that occurs in the first hours after waking. And there is some evidence that this hormonal environment supports better anabolic response to training. It is not a dramatic difference, but if you have a choice, train in the morning. And here's the thing about cortisol that most men do not think about. Cortisol and testosterone have an inverse relationship. When cortisol is chronically elevated, testosterone tends to be suppressed. Cortisol is your stress hormone, and chronic stress, whether from work, financial pressure, relationship tension, or even excessive exercise without adequate recovery, keeps cortisol elevated and testosterone suppressed. Men over 60 who are carrying significant psychological stress often have measurably lower testosterone than their peers, independent of age. Managing stress is not a soft suggestion, it is a hormonal intervention. The most practical cortisol management tool for men over 60 that has actual research behind it is not meditation, though that can help too. It is sunlight exposure in the morning. Getting outside within 30 to 45 minutes of waking and spending 10 to 15 minutes in natural light without sunglasses helps calibrate your circadian rhythm, stabilizes cortisol's daily pattern, and supports the hormonal environment that allows testosterone production to function properly. This is free. It takes 10 minutes. And most men over 60 are not doing it. Let us talk about a few specific foods that have documented or traditionally supported testosterone production, because the grocery store is where you can make the most immediate changes. Zinc is one of the most important minerals for testosterone synthesis, and zinc deficiency is surprisingly common in men over 60. The reasons are partly dietary, because older men often eat less red meat and shellfish, which are the richest food sources of zinc, and partly absorptive, because the gut's ability to absorb zinc tends to decline with age. A study published in Nutrition in 1996 found that zinc supplementation in zinc-deficient elderly men raised their testosterone levels significantly. Oysters are the single richest food source of zinc available. 6 medium oysters contain roughly 32 milligrams of zinc, which is nearly 3 times the daily recommended intake. You do not need to eat oysters every day, but 2 or 3 servings per week of zinc-rich foods, including oysters, beef, pumpkin seeds, and chickpeas, can meaningfully support testosterone-related pathways. Magnesium is the second mineral that is chronically low in older men and directly connected to testosterone. A study published in Biological Trace Element Research in 2011 found that magnesium supplementation was associated with increased testosterone levels in both sedentary older men and in older men who exercised. Dietary sources of magnesium include dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, black beans, almonds, and dark chocolate. The recommended daily intake for men over 60 is around 420 milligrams. Most American men get less than 300. That gap matters. Vitamin D deserves its own paragraph because it is technically a hormone precursor, not just a vitamin, and its connection to testosterone is well documented. A 12-month randomized controlled trial published in Hormone and Metabolic Research in 2011 found that men who supplemented with 3,332 IU of vitamin D daily had significantly higher testosterone levels than the placebo group at the end of the study. Men over 60 are at high risk for vitamin D deficiency for several reasons. They spend less time outdoors, their skin is less efficient at synthesizing vitamin D from sunlight, and their kidneys are somewhat less effective at converting vitamin D to its active form. A simple blood test at your next doctor visit can tell you your vitamin D level. If it is below 40 nanograms per milliliter, which is where many men over 60 fall, supplementing with 2,000 to 4,000 IU daily under medical guidance is a reasonable and inexpensive intervention. A 90-day supply of vitamin D3 at 2,000 IU costs about $8 at any pharmacy. Now let us talk about something that almost never comes up in mainstream health content but has a real, documented mechanism behind it. Body fat percentage and testosterone have a direct, bidirectional relationship that gets worse the longer you ignore it. Adipose tissue, meaning body fat, contains an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase converts testosterone into estrogen. The more body fat you carry, particularly around the abdomen, the more aromatase activity you have, and the more of your existing testosterone gets converted into estrogen. This is not a minor effect. Men with obesity have significantly lower testosterone levels on average than lean men of the same age, and a meaningful portion of that difference is explained by aromatase activity in fat tissue. This means that losing even 10 to 15 pounds of body fat, if you are carrying excess weight, can raise your testosterone levels through a direct biochemical mechanism, not just through general health improvement. The practical implication is that the resistance training and dietary changes described earlier do double duty. They support testosterone production directly through the training stimulus and the nutritional building blocks, and they reduce body fat, which reduces aromatase activity, which reduces the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. These effects compound over time. A 68-year-old man who loses 15 pounds of fat over 6 months while adding muscle through resistance training is not just looking better. He is chemically changing the hormonal environment in his body in a measurable way. There is also a specific dietary pattern worth mentioning here. Processed carbohydrates, particularly refined sugars and white flour products, cause rapid spikes in insulin. Chronically elevated insulin is associated with lower testosterone levels through several mechanisms, including increased aromatase activity and direct suppression of the hypothalamic pituitary axis that regulates testosterone production. Men over 60 who eat significant amounts of bread, Pasta, crackers, cereals, and sweetened foods are running a low-grade insulin disruption that works against testosterone every single day. Replacing processed carbohydrates with whole food sources like sweet potatoes, legumes, and whole grains is not about being on a diet. It is about removing a hormonal suppressor from your daily routine. This is a good point to mention the PDF, because everything covered so far, the foods, the sleep adjustments, the training principles, the morning routine, the supplement considerations, it is a lot to hold in your head. There is a printable one-page protocol at the link below this video that organizes all of it into a daily checklist and a weekly grocery list. It is the kind of thing you print once, stick to the fridge, and actually use. It is not a sales pitch wrapped in a PDF. It is a practical tool that takes everything in this video and makes it actionable without requiring you to take notes. Let us get into some of the deeper mistakes that men over 60 make, the ones that cancel out everything else. The first is overtraining without recovery. Some men, once they understand that resistance training supports testosterone, start training 6 or 7 days per week with high intensity. This is counterproductive. Overtraining raises cortisol, suppresses testosterone, and leads to injury. For men over 60, 3 to 4 resistance training sessions per week, with at least one full rest day between sessions, is the evidence-supported range. Recovery is not optional. It is when the adaptation and hormonal response actually happen. The second mistake is ignoring the gut. There is growing research on the connection between gut microbiome health and testosterone levels, and while the science is still developing, there is a plausible mechanism. The gut microbiome plays a role in the metabolism of sex hormones, and disrupted gut health, which is common in men over 60 who have taken antibiotics repeatedly or eat low-fiber diets, may affect how testosterone is processed and recycled in the body. Eating fermented foods like full-fat yogurt, which brings us back to where we started, kimchi, sauerkraut, and kefir, along with high-fiber vegetables, supports gut microbiome diversity. This is not a testosterone miracle cure, but it is one more variable that most men are not thinking about. The third mistake is chronic dehydration. Water is involved in virtually every metabolic process in the body, including hormone transport and synthesis. Older men are notoriously underhydrated, partly because the sensation of thirst diminishes with age, meaning you can be significantly dehydrated without feeling thirsty. A simple target for a man over 60 is half his body weight in ounces of water per day. If you weigh 190 pounds, that is 95 ounces, roughly 12 cups. Most men are getting 5 or 6. This is not a testosterone-specific intervention, but dehydration impairs everything, including hormonal function, and it is free to fix. The fourth mistake is spending money on the wrong supplements. The testosterone supplement market is enormous and largely ineffective. A bottle of something called testosterone booster at a supplement store, often priced between $40 and 70 cents, typically contains a combination of ingredients like Tribulus terrestris, fenugreek, and various herbal extracts. The research on most of these is weak, inconsistent, or conducted on young men, not men over 60. The supplements that have the most consistent evidence behind them for supporting testosterone in older men are the basic micronutrients that are actually deficient: zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D. These cost almost nothing. A combined zinc and magnesium supplement, often sold as ZMA, costs around $15 for a 90-day supply. Vitamin D3 at 2,000 IU is around $8 for 90 days. That is $23 for 3 months of the most evidence-supported supplementation available, compared to $60 a month for a fancy testosterone booster with minimal evidence behind it. Now let us talk about something that has been practiced in various forms across cultures for centuries: the cold exposure protocol, because this is one of the most underutilized and lowest-cost tools available to men over 60. Cold exposure, specifically cold showers or cold water immersion, has been used in traditional health practices in Scandinavian cultures, in Japanese onsen traditions that involve alternating hot and cold, and in various Eastern European folk health routines for generations. The mechanism proposed in more recent research involves the relationship between cold exposure and the sympathetic nervous system and the downstream effects on cortisol regulation and testosterone. A study published in the journal Andrologia in 1990 found that scrotal temperature has a direct effect on testosterone production, and that cooling the testes even modestly is associated with increased testosterone synthesis. This is also why tight underwear and prolonged sitting, which raises scrotal temperature, are considered factors in testosterone suppression. The practical application is not complicated. Ending your shower with 90 seconds to 2 minutes of cold water is a starting point. Not ice cold if that is not accessible, but noticeably cold. The research on cold exposure and testosterone in older men specifically is limited, so this should be framed as a traditional and mechanistically plausible practice rather than a proven intervention. But the cost is zero, the downside is minimal, and the general effects on alertness, circulation, and stress response are well documented. Let us talk about one more category that almost nobody mentions in these conversations: social engagement and purpose. This sounds like a departure from the practical, but it is not. Research from institutions including Harvard and the University of Michigan has looked at the relationship between social isolation, sense of purpose, and testosterone in older men. Men who are socially isolated, who have retired without replacing the structure and identity that work provided, who feel purposeless, tend to have lower testosterone levels than men who are engaged, active in their communities, and connected to other people. The mechanism is partly cortisol, because isolation and purposelessness raise chronic stress, and partly behavioral, because men who feel engaged tend to exercise more, sleep better, and eat better. But there may also be a direct hormonal component related to social competition, challenge, and engagement that has roots in evolutionary biology. The practical implication is not that you need to join a club or force social interaction. It is that if you have been feeling flat, low energy, low drive, and disconnected since retirement or since a major life change, that is not just psychology. It may have a measurable hormonal component. Getting back into a routine that includes physical challenge, social contact, and something that feels like meaningful effort, whether that is coaching, volunteering, building something, learning something new, or competing in a recreational sport, is not soft advice. It is a hormonal intervention dressed in practical clothing. There is also a specific documented phenomenon called the winner effect. Research on competitive behavior in men, including work published in journals like Hormones and Behavior, has found that men who engage in competition and win, even in low-stakes settings like chess, sports, or games, experience a temporary rise in testosterone. Men who disengage from all forms of challenge and competition, which is common in retirement, lose this repeated small stimulus. Finding ways to stay competitive, even informally, is a real and underappreciated part of testosterone maintenance in older men. Let us bring all of this together into what a realistic day looks like for a man over 60 who is taking this seriously. You wake up and within 30 minutes you go outside for 10 to 15 minutes of natural light exposure without sunglasses. You drink 16 ounces of water immediately after waking because you have been mildly dehydrated for 8 hours. Breakfast is 2 whole eggs cooked in butter or olive oil, maybe with some spinach and a piece of whole grain toast, not the low-fat yogurt. You take your vitamin D3 and your zinc and magnesium with breakfast. 3 or 4 mornings per week, you do 30 to 45 minutes of resistance training, compound movements, challenging weights, proper rest between sets. On the other days, you walk, you move, you do light mobility work, but you're not grinding through high-intensity work every single day. You eat zinc-rich foods 2 or 3 times per week. You keep processed carbohydrates low, you eat vegetables at most meals, you have a drink if you want one, but you finish it by 7 or 8 p.m. You drop your bedroom temperature to 66 degrees before bed. You stop looking at screens 90 minutes before sleep. You sleep 7 to 8 hours. That is it. That is the protocol. It is not exotic. It is not expensive. The grocery changes cost maybe $20 to $30 more per month than what you are already spending. The supplements are $23 for 3 months. The training requires access to a set of dumbbells, which you can buy used for $30 to $50, or a gym membership which runs $20 to $4 per month at most basic gyms. The sleep and morning routine changes cost nothing. The total financial investment in this protocol is less than 1 month of a testosterone booster supplement that probably does not work. And the timeline is realistic. You are not going to feel like a different person in 3 days. But men who make these changes consistently and stick with them for 60 to 90 days consistently report improvements in energy, mood, strength, sleep quality, and drive. Those are not just subjective feelings, They correspond to measurable changes in hormonal environment that the habits described in this video are designed to support. Now, if you want all of this organized into something you can actually use without rewatching this video, the printable protocol PDF is linked below. It includes a daily checklist, a weekly grocery list with specific foods and approximate costs, a simple 3-day resistance training template with exercise options for men over 60, and a supplement reference sheet. It is one-page printable and designed to go on your fridge or in your gym bag. It is the kind of document that takes everything discussed here and makes it something you can act on tomorrow morning without having to remember everything. One thing worth saying directly before this ends. If you have symptoms that go beyond low energy and mild fatigue, if you're experiencing significant depression, sexual dysfunction, extreme fatigue, or other symptoms that are meaningfully affecting your quality of life, please talk to a doctor and ask specifically about having your testosterone levels tested. A simple blood test can give you an actual number, and that number is the starting point for any serious conversation about whether medical intervention is appropriate. The habits in this video are not a substitute for medical care when medical care is warranted. They are the foundation that makes everything else work better, whether you're working with a doctor or not. What most men over 60 discover when they get their testosterone tested is that their levels are in the low normal range, not clinically deficient, but not optimal either. That is the range where lifestyle intervention has the most leverage. That is the range where the habits described in this video can move the needle in a meaningful and sustained way without a prescription, without a clinic visit, and without spending money you do not need to spend. Leave a comment below and tell me one thing from this video you're going to change tomorrow. Whether it is the breakfast, the bedroom temperature, the training, or the morning sunlight. Pick one thing and write it down. The men who make one specific change and stick with it for 2 weeks almost always come back and make a second change. That is how this works. Not all at once. One thing at a time, consistently, over 60 to 90 days. The next video covers something connected to this one. It is about the specific training mistakes men over 60 make that not only fail to build muscle, but actively accelerate muscle loss. And one of them is something almost every man in his 60s is doing in the gym right now, thinking it is the safe and responsible approach. If that sounds like something worth knowing, it is queued up for you. The PDF is below, the comment section is open, and if you know a man over 60 who is dealing with low energy, fatigue, or the feeling that he is just not quite himself anymore, share this video with him, not as a hint, as a resource. Because most of what is holding men back at this age is not age itself. It is information that was either never given to them or actively pointed in the wrong direction for decades. That stops today.